Hi everyone, so I am the intern in the data analytics and big data team in the UK, and as part of my time interning at Oracle, I've had the opportunity to work with the World Bee Project, who aim to protect bees and prevent their declining population. As I'm sure many of you are aware, bees are in trouble. And that's a real shame because we are highly dependent on bees and their pollination. They pollinate about a third of the food that we consume, and especially with growing populations, that's a big issue. That equates to about 75% of our crops. So 75% of our crops are partially dependent on pollination, and that's not necessarily just from bees, but that's also other pollinators, which also are facing extinction. So we've got to try and come up with a solution to figure out why this is happening and what we can do to help that. So what are the aims of the World Bee Project? What they want to do is create a global network of connected hives which pull in data about the colonies, such as the weight of the hive, the temperature, the surrounding temperature, the humidity, and also the audio. And then what we're doing is using Oracle technology to stream that data straight back from the hives in real time into our database, and to run some analytics on top of that and apply machine learning to try and gain some real insights into this data. And the issue that we faced previously is that we just do not have a way to collect this much data. But if we're able to set up a global network, this is all quite new, so we've only got hives in about 4 locations at the moment around UK, Ireland and Israel. But the plan is to expand and roll out new hives all the time in new countries and new locations. So these are the technologies that we're using to do so. And when we have more hives in more locations in different habitats, we're able to gain a better understanding of what food sources are better for the bees and the colonies, maybe what diseases they're facing in different locations, different areas, and by pulling this all together from all over the world, we're empowering not only scientists who are going to have access to this data and be able to find out their own insights from this data, but by having a large set of data, we're able to train machine learning models which we can then use to push out real-time alerts to beekeepers to let them know if something's going on in their hive. So the more data that we're able to collect, we're able to figure out what's normal for a hive and then translate that into what's not, and then we can tell beekeepers. So there's a few data points up there that I've mentioned, and one of those is temperature. So in a hive, you've got a brood box, which is where the queen is kept. And the bees actually do a very good job of self-regulating that temperature of that brood box to be about 34 degrees, 34, 35, as that is the optimal temperature for the queen to breed and lay eggs and all that stuff. So you can see there's the blue line on the top, which is actually the temperature of the brood box, and underneath it is the temperature of the surrounding location over the course of about 3 months. So you can see how steady that is. And bees do that all themselves. They've got heater bees who are able to heat themselves up about 10 degrees just by contracting their muscles. And then they do that to raise the temperature, or they're even able to lower the temperature by pushing the hot air out of the hive, because they really need it, this temperature. So what we're able to do is pick up on when this temperature's dropped. And there's always going to be a reason for that. It might be that the queen has left the brood box and has escaped into the supers, which is the area above. It might be that there's an issue, the queen may have died, but we can detect this in real time and say to the beekeeper, hey, have you seen this? This might be something you need to go look at because there's something off in this hive. Another thing that we're analysing is the audio from the hives. So you can see from these graphs, the yellow lines are when a hive is swarming, and the blue lines are when a hive is not swarming. And swarming is when usually about half a bee colony will basically get up and leave the hive. That might be for a number of reasons. It might be that the hive is too crowded, it might be there's a new queen, it might be that the temperature or something is off inside the hive. that's causing the bees to be unhappy and swarm. And when they're swarming, they're actually, so what we're looking at here is audio data with frequency along the bottom and amplitude up the top. And we can see that there's a clear distinction between when hives are swarming and not swarming. So one of my colleagues actually ran some principal component analysis to identify which frequencies this was having the largest effect on. And you can see there's a big spike at about 250, and then also from about 180 down to 0, there's increased activity. So if we dive into this a bit deeper, looking at swarming on the left, not swarming on the right, you can see this big spike in the hive that's swarming at about 250. And we've actually recently learned in the past few days actually, is that this is the frequency of the bees taking off. So if we're looking at this, we're already too late because they're already gone. So what we're actually interested in is this low-level warble here. And what this is actually showing us is basically the queen bee is actually too fat to fly. She cannot leave the hive in normal circumstances. So if they're getting ready to swarm, all of the nurse bees put the queen bee on a restricted diet for about 3 weeks. As well as that, they also chase her around the hive to try and get her to lose a bit of weight. So you can imagine all these nurse bees who are just sitting there with nothing to do, who are usually feeding her and taking care of her every need, suddenly have a lot less to do and they're chasing around the hive. This creates increased activity on the microphone. So we're able to detect this up to 3 weeks in advance, so we can tell beekeepers, guys, look, your bees are not happy, you need to do something about this. And they can look into whether maybe the hive's too crowded, so they can get another hive for them to migrate into, maybe the conditions are wrong and they need to insulate the hive better, or something along those lines in the winter. Or maybe there's a queen bee, in which case in which case they're probably going to leave anyway, so you want to get another hive there for them to move into. But we're able to do this in real time, analyze it, send this audio data back to our cloud service, back to our database, have our analytic cloud running on top, applying machine learning models to really gain insights out of this data and do something about it. Another thing that we haven't started doing this, but some people have, is actually putting tiny little chips on the back of bees, like this. It's harmless, I assure you. And then they're using IoT sensors around the hives to try to determine where bees are actually going to. But you can imagine, for one, this is a very delicate and difficult process to attach this to individual bees, and such is very expensive. And then also you've got the issue of where do you put the beacons, because if you know where to put the beacons, then you've already got a good idea where the bees are going. So you're going to need a lot of beacons to pick up where the bees are flying to. So instead of that, what people have started doing now is actually looking at their waggle dance. So what this is, when a bee goes to find some food, it will bring back a sample of that food to the hive for other bees to taste and try, see if they like it. And then what they'll do is this waggle dance. So they'll line themselves up in the direction of the food relative to the sun, and they'll shake their body. And then they'll go back, loop back around, almost in figure of eights, and keep doing this in the direction. And the intensity of this waggle is how far away the food is. So they're able to tell the bees, I've got this sample of food, and it's in this direction, this far away. And bees are actually very clever telling distances. The way they travel is by looking at the floor and always moving so the floor is traveling at the same speed. So they know that when they go up higher, they're actually traveling faster and further because the floor is traveling at the same speed in their eyes, but they're further away from it. And so they actually do this to come into land. They're moving at the same speed all the time, but they just get closer to the floor, so they're slowing down, but it looks like they're moving at the same speed. So they're able to actually tell very accurately other bees where these food sources are. Although interestingly, when it comes to food sources, they're actually a bit more inaccurate because they assume that once a bee's nearby, you'll be able to pick up the scent and find itself, but if they're directed into another hive, they're actually extremely accurate in where they're telling other bees to go. And so what some people have done is put actually PlayStation cameras inside hives and used machine learning to detect when these bees are doing this dance. And if they're doing it, then they can analyse where the bee is pointing and how hard they're shaking their body. And they did this by placing a food source that they set up in proximity of the hive, knowing that bees will go to it. So then they know when their bees are in the waggle dance in that direction, they're pointing that far away. And so we had more bees that do it, they build up this circle, and they're able to actually plot that on a map. So they could see, so you can see in the bottom left, there's where all the bees are pointing to, which is around the green arrow where the data source is, where the food source is, and the little red arrow is the hive. And you can see little pockets of purple often near greenery in other places, which is other food sources that the bees have found and gone back and told the hive, and these cameras have been able to plot it. So we're actually able to, by looking at bees' movements, see where they have been and where they are going without having to look outside the hive. We can all tell just from inside the hive. And so we're actually pulling in a lot of data. So Michael talked earlier about Bloodhound, which had about, the supersonic car had about 350 sensors on it. And so that was pulling in a lot of data. What's interesting is if we've got 4 hives that we're pulling in audio data, we're already pulling in more data than Bloodhound was. So we've got about 5 minutes of audio, we convert that into numeric values, which we can then plot. So we've got frequency and amplitude. We can plot that on a graph, and every 5 minutes is equivalent to 15 million rows of data. And then we can build these machine learning models on top. And the more data we've got, the more accurate these models are going to get, and to the point that we can tell what normal activity is in a hive and immediately detect when something is off and tell the beekeepers. So how else can this be applied? These data sources are widely sought after because we don't have anything of this scale yet. And as I said, this project has only been officially announced for about the past month or so. So it's still very new. We're rolling out new hives all the time to try and build up these data sets, because the more we have, the better understanding we've got. But for example, if we're able to understand pollination methods better and build accurate models that we can give out, then, for example, we could extend shelf life of products in supermarkets rather than setting it too low, so that because they have to waste so much food currently because they don't have a proper understanding of how long the food is going to last. If we're able to actually build up a model of the pollination, we'd be able to show that and more accurately predict when stuff's going off. There's actually a really interesting use case to do with chemicals. So bees are actually extremely sensitive to chemicals. And in Dusseldorf Airport, what they've actually started doing is using bees to detect excess pollution and also fertilizer bombs. Because when bees are expecting food, they actually stick out their tongue. So what they're able to do is stick bees near this chemical and then feed the bees some sugar solution and associate this chemical with being fed with the bees. So then what they do is actually get the bees within proximity of the airport, and the bees will come back and stick out their tongue expecting food if they've detected certain chemicals. So that's honestly not a use case that I'd expected, and when I first heard that I thought, you've got to be having me on, like there's no way an airport's actually doing this, but apparently Dusseldorf, they've already got it. And then government as well, so supporting farmers who are helping to protect bees is a huge step. And we've got an issue at the moment in London where beehives have actually become quite trendy now, so a lot of people in London are getting beehives, and even companies getting beehives, which is fantastic because it means that bees have more places to live, there's more people looking after them. But we've actually got a problem in London where there's not enough green spaces for the bees to get food from. So it's not even just helping bee farmers and people who look after the bees, but it's also getting people to plant more wildflowers, even just on their balconies, to attract the bees and give them a new source of pollen to use. And then also, another aspect of all of this is to get more people interested in STEM. So we're taking this to schools, we are going and teaching kids about this, letting them see the data, see what we're doing with bees, and we're taking this to loads of events that we're going to really try and increase awareness and get people interested in bees, because I've learned so much about bees that I had no idea even was a thing, and I just keep finding out more and more stuff. The other day I was planning to have a 15-minute catch-up with someone, and we ended up spending our whole lunch break just talking about the bees for a solid hour. I didn't have any lunch that day, but oh. So I hope that with this time I'll be able to give you a little bit of insight about what we're doing with the bees and a little bit of a better understanding of how all this data is helping with the bee populations, and also bee farmers and those looking after the bees. And if you're interested in finding out more information about the bees, our partners, the World Bee Project and ARNIA, have loads of information on their website. ARNIA are the guys who produce the boxes with the sensors in that go inside and around the hives, and they also do some of their own analytics on there. So if you are looking to find out more, that's a good place to start. Also, feel free to contact me and I'll happily talk about bees until you're sick of them. Thank you very much.
How interesting. I didn't know that bees were so important for our lives and the food production. So I will treat them with more respect next year summer when I'm sitting on my terrace and enjoying a drink. I think we can take a question from the audience. So, do we have questions from the audience? Who would like to ask a question about the bee project or the solutions that have been used? No questions? Then I have my own question, you know. You mentioned something that you were analyzing noise.
Yeah.
So you take the noise, you analyze it, you use machine learning, and that's of course very interesting for the bees, but can you also use this for other industries or use cases?
Oh, absolutely. So the audio analysis we're doing is real-time analysis, and so what we're able to do is, if, for example, a utility company or something like that wanted to approach us and analyze their engines or pipes, we'd be able to send audio down the pipes and see how it comes back, and then analyze that and build up a model to be able to tell maybe there's a crack in this pipe, the audio is coming back odd, or maybe the engines aren't quite functioning, because at the moment we need sensors all over the place to tell. But if we're able to also use audio just to pick up, maybe there's a slight knocking somewhere, there's a lot of use cases for this audio analysis,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Or perhaps even with car maintenance.
Yeah,
yes,
definitely.
the engine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.